All right, welcome to another episode of Adventures in Real Estate. We've got a special guest with us this time, extraordinaire broker, educator extraordinaire, Julian Alexander. And he is here with me this morning. Good morning, Julian.
Good morning. Glad to be here.
Good. Well, Julian has been on the team and is an integral part of our organization. And I wanted you to know him better because he's got a great history. So how long have we known each other exactly?
Gosh, I would have to say we met back in 2008 or 9.
8 or 9, yeah. Right.
It's been a long time.
And do we want to go into that history on how that is?
I don't think so.
Okay.
You know, just suffice it to say that since I've known you that long and I still know you and we hang out quite a bit together, that speaks volumes.
Well, it's just lucky that we really like your wife. I mean, we kind of put up with
right.
you. Same with me, I'm sure. And what is your role here right now? What is your biggest thing that you do for us?
Well, the biggest thing I do is, as the in-house broker, I source deals, and once sourced, I analyze deals. And once I've done that, if I find something that I believe has merit, then I will take my analysis and pass it over to you and let you critique it and see if it fits what you believe is the best for our next investment.
Yeah, and there is a hellacious amount of analysis that goes into each one of those deals. Let's talk about that a little bit. Okay, sourcing a deal is fine. Everybody says, oh, I got a deal. Right. But then you got to get into the numbers. What exactly do you do to go through those numbers to figure out whether it's a deal or not?
Well, the biggest thing that I want to know is who's bringing me the deal. And the reason I say that is because then I will know how much credibility the information I'm being given has. And I don't mean to denigrate any specific person in the brokerage community. It's just some brokers are a little more detailed and a little more forthcoming than others. And therefore, I will either have to dig deeper or I will know that the information that's in front of me is something that I can really accept.
Whether you can trust it or not.
Yeah, well, okay.
Well, I know some brokers are very conservative, some are very aggressive, and so
Correct.
I completely understand where you're coming from on that. Now, you go through and you take that all the way. First off, how do you even know what things are priced at right now?
Well, it's difficult to know what pricing is in today's environment. Now, I know that if someone were to see this particular podcast a year from now, it may not be relevant.
Could be different, yeah.
But in today's environment with COVID, the relevancy that I'm talking about, or I will be talking about, is that at present we're not sure where the income is going to be 60 days, 90 days out. The federal stimulus money has been drying up, and so it's a major challenge right now to really understand that the monies that were there to kind of maintain a safety net under the general populace, it has been pulled away, and therefore we will start to see some more delinquency, and as a result of the expiration of the eviction moratoriums, we'll start seeing vacancies go up. So you go from being an analyst to being an analyst kind of soothsayer, trying to figure out.
Got your crystal ball.
Yeah, well, mine has been broken for a while, and they can't find parts for it, but I'm making do.
Good. Well, you bring up an interesting point, because even though you're analyzing a property, you need to analyze it based on what's happening now.
Correct.
Or 2 months ago when we didn't have late fees, things like that, how that affects income. So there's a constant juggling act of what's happening in the economy right now, how are we projecting out income, what kind of income bumps can we get,
Correct.
And then you're pulling from other sources too for additional data on the income side, right?
I am. But there's no better source than the seller's information. And so I try to build some key performance indicators from that. I specifically target rent rolls. Rent rolls are the key to everything. Expenses can be one way or another depending on who's operating, but the income is not, and vacancy factors are not, and delinquency is not. So
I think a lot of people overlook the value of the rent roll and really analyzing that. What are some of the key points you look at on that rent roll?
Oh gosh, there's one of the first ones I want to look at is, well, let me back up. One of the first things that are stated in the offering memorandum are street rent or their
Market
current
rent,
rent,
yeah.
market rent, and that's great and wonderful. But first thing I want to know is what is the effective rent. So I'll take their receipts for the month, then I'll divide it by the occupied units to really get a handle on what the effective rent is. Then I'll go back and look at leases that have been put in place within the last 90 days, no more than 90 days, and see if they are achieving that market rent.
Yep.
Because it's one thing to say the market rent is this, and they're still making concessions. So that's critical. Delinquency is also key, but unfortunately, a lot of the rent rolls won't show delinquency.
No, that's why you got to look at other reports.
Correct.
And so, just to expand on that a little bit more, is you look at the effective rent for every lease that's been signed over whatever that period that is.
Correct.
And then compare that to what's been done over the last 90 days to see where that trend is.
Exactly. And if possible, I will ask for the previous year's rent roll as well to match what they were doing and see where the trajectory has been.
Sure, that's a lot of detail just on the income side.
Just, well, again, expenses are one thing. You can operate thinner or leaner or fatter in one or multiple line items, but income is there.
Yeah.
Multifamily properties, any rental property runs on income.
And that's what the lenders are looking at first and foremost.
Precisely,
Is what is
yes.
the income, because expenses will differ from buyer to buyer.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
What has been the biggest problem expenses over the last year?
Oh, that one's an easy one. It's property taxes. Property taxes are the bane of our existence because they are the largest line item on any expense statement, and we don't really know exactly how to project what the next year is going to be, even though we might be latter in the year, because there's always going to be a protest in from the current seller.
Yes. And I think one of the problems we've had also, because we budget out, we're buying, let's just say 3 years ago, we're buying at a 7 cap or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Well, just with cap rate compression, no changes in the operations of a property, but the cap rate compression gives the lower the cap rate, the higher the price. Correct. So other people buy at lower cap rates, which drives the value of the property up. And even though we don't make another penny, our property taxes jump way up.
Absolutely.
And some cities are more aggressive than others. But even insurance, we're seeing a big jump in insurance too.
Oh, absolutely. I recall just 16 months back, an average per unit insurance bill would be anywhere between $300 to $325. Today we're looking at $450, $500, even topping $500 a door.
Absolutely insane. Everything goes up. I think what always gets me is things like a couple of our nicer properties with rents that are $1,200. Property taxes are $300 to $400 a month per unit on those properties. They're 25% partner. The government is a 25% partner on your gross, not on your net.
Oh, without a doubt.
And if you look at a net and we have a margin of, let's just say 10%, they would be taking, if our margin is 10% after that, they're taking 25% of gross. So if we have a 35% margin, they're taking 25% of it. They are a huge percent of our actual ownership just to pay the taxes.
That's true.
Sorry, I'm going to get on a soapbox. We've got to do something about taxes in Texas on property taxes. But let's back up. How did you get into real estate in the first place?
Well, it's funny because it was accidental. I grew up in an area of Houston, Texas, which is it's called Montrose, and it was, and I'll tell you why I say was, it was a very eclectic neighborhood that had duplexes, triplexes, and single-family homes. Well, my parents and their 6 kids lived in a home that across the street were 2 duplexes. They were one over the other. And I used to cut the grass for these people because they were rental property. And one day, Mrs. Green, who she owned it, her husband had passed, and she came over to pay me, and she asked my parents if they wanted to buy them. And of course, my parents had no clue about rental real estate. Heck, they were just doing okay to pay the bills and keep the 6 kids under control. Well, they said, we don't know what we do. Oh, you don't have to worry about it. All you have to do is just make sure that, things are operating correctly. You collect the rent. Well, it wasn't anything that
it's never that easy.
Yeah, but it wasn't anything that they were interested in. But what stuck in my mind was she said, well, part of the conversation was, and we don't have any money. You can imagine with that kind of.
Oh yeah.
So she said, oh, you don't have to worry about it. I will carry the note, and you can just pay me now. This is critical. She was offering him at $12,000, not a unit, but per duplex, $24,000. Fast forward about 3-4 years later, maybe 5 tops, and I got exposed to one of the no money down gurus. And so, like everybody else, I said, real estate sounds like it's a very interesting field to get into. And then I thought back on these 2 duplexes, and the more I got educated on it, the more I said, this is for me. And that was when I was about 21 years old.
Wow.
At 21, I bought my first duplex then.
Everybody says get in earlier, and you got in very early.
I did, and oddly enough, I made a mistake on it, because as real estate is described, that it's location, location, location. The deal was good, but the location wasn't, and ultimately the location sank me. So I didn't lose money on it, but I didn't make any money on it.
But
that's how I got in.
But it still whet your appetite and said, hey, this is the right thing.
And then fast forward, my parents have now passed. I sold my parents' home that they had since the 60s for a teardown at $425,000.
Wow.
And it got torn down within days of closing, and 2 side-by-side townhouses were put up at $990,000, and they sold like that.
Wow.
So I'm thinking, let's say if they had purchased those 2 duplexes across the street, 2 separate lots at $12,000 a piece, can you imagine the kind of money they would have had, the legacy they would have been able to pass on to their kids?
If they would have just taken it, woulda, shoulda, coulda. We look back on that all the time.
But it is education. Education is critical.
Oh, absolutely. If you don't know what you're doing, you're going to get hurt. Everybody has the story. I know a guy who lost his shirt, investing in real estate.
Yeah.
But that's why we attract passive investors to utilize our experience.
Exactly.
Because you underwrite deals. How many deals do you underwrite before we find one that makes sense?
Well, if I were to quantify it, it would be no less than 25 to 30, and it can be as many as 50 to 75. But depending on the time of the year and the activity and how many properties are coming to market.
And that's just finding something that makes sense. That doesn't even mean
Correct.
we can buy that.
That is correct.
Those.
Yeah, that's just saying, hey, this one is in the ballpark.
Just a separate question. So what are some tricks to getting some deals under contract?
Well, you know what? I don't like that word tricks, because, but I get the gist of your question. The methods that I think are important are, 1, honesty.
Absolutely.
Honesty in your communication, consistency in your communication. So when you are dealing with the brokerage community, you are always going to be viewed as, hey, whatever they tell me, I can take it to the bank.
Yep.
And so that's first and foremost. I have this hard and fast rule that I am not in the real estate business. I am in the people business first, and I work with real estate. So I leverage relationships, and that is the first. Number 2 is analysis is critical. And you have to dig deep, and you have to dig and look in the places that your average person won't look. And then, of course, you have to be able to project out in your pro forma and be confident that you'll be able to hit that pro forma.
Well, how does that help you get a deal under contract with a broker then?
Well, because if I am very confident in the analysis, then I will be confident in the deal, or should I say, in the negotiating of the deal.
Right.
And of course, in today's market is highly competitive, and so when we are ready to make the offer, I will come back to the relationship with the brokerage, and also with the track record that we have with the brokerage community. And then also to be able to bring to bear that when we go into contract, we don't retrade deals.
That's right.
We close when we say we're going to close. I cannot think of just one deal that we haven't closed in how many years? Over 10 years, and it was not our fault. It was the seller's fault.
Exactly. That was a train wreck. But
It was.
But yes, then so that's why the underwriting and communicating that to the brokers is important, to sell them on, hey, we're not going to retrade. But luckily, we've got a good history with that.
Yes, we do.
But we can also show on the underwriting that, because just so that you know, just so the audience knows, is they price them unpriced. It says price to market, meaning that they're basically having an auction on it. They have a call for offers date where you got to get your offer in there and you're bidding against everybody else. The broker takes all of those offers, puts it on a list, and presents it to the seller. And the seller doesn't know these buyers a lot of times, so they rely on the broker to say who's good and who's bad.
Or I don't know if they're good or bad. I just don't know them.
Don't know them, exactly. Whereas they can say, here is a known quantity. I've closed with these people before. They do what they say they're going to do. Their price might be a little bit lower, but I know that they don't retrade and they don't do this. And this other
There won't be a false
outfit
start.
out of state is, they're trying to buy their first deal, things like that. So number one thing to brokers seems to be certainty of close, which also then hard money comes into play right now.
Correct.
So it's an auction with hard money, and you got to know what you're doing. You know, it's not for the faint of heart. We just made an offer on a property. It's $150,000 non-refundable day one. So we have to know that when I put that money up, we're going to close on that deal because we know that it's a good deal going in.
Yeah, we are confident in our analysis.
Exactly. Have to be confident in that. So, and still can't get deals. What's nice is we've got a relationship now with a lot of them that they'll just show us the deal and say whether or not hey, he wants X amount of dollars for it. If we can get there, we can get the deal.
Right.
And that's how I think it should be priced is, hey, you want $12 million for the property? I can look at it and say whether or not, we'll pay $12 million or not, but this auction junk is frustrating.
I won't say that I disagree with you in that that's the way it ought to be, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter to me what the seller wants. It matters what we can pay for the property.
Right, but then it's all a guessing game. It's just in the market right now. It's very hard to buy a deal, especially for somebody new.
Yeah. Well, and let me add one other thing. You asked me about what gets a deal done, and whether it's a full-on access agreement, a formal one, or informal one. And what I mean by informal is when we tour a property, when we feel like, okay, this is worth going to look, we will take our contractor, we will take our property management people, we'll take our lender, we'll take the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker. We'll take anybody and everybody that's going to be relevant to that deal, so that everybody can impart to us what their take of the deal was, and maybe spot something that we missed.
Exactly.
And so when we then come back and tweak our analysis, we know with I would say better than 70% certainty that it's a deal or not a deal.
Exactly. Now, why are you with me? Why are you at DGRE? What?
Well, as you know, I was an investor before, you and I started working together at DGRE. Of course, we've done a lot of business together in the years past. But what drew me to you is again, I think I've got a pretty good sense of people, and again, I'm all about people, and I think without any hesitation, the biggest thing was your integrity. I think everybody has some kind of, maybe not a horror story, but let's just say something that didn't work out in a deal, who's been in business long enough, and you don't shy away from that kind of a question. You know, if you're asked, hey, have you ever lost money or have you ever done a deal that didn't go well, you won't hesitate. You won't do a big tap dance. You will say, absolutely. And here was the deal, and this is why. As far as I know, and I've known you over a decade, there's only been one deal
Yep.
like that.
There's only one loser. Yep.
But that to me speaks volumes. I mean, volumes. Then you bolster that with your performance, and I'll get the check from you later. But I think you're a pretty smart businessman.
Well, I appreciate that. I certainly do. Try not to get a big ego on that, but we try, and we've developed a great team, and love having you on here. Let's do this. What is your biggest horror story in doing a deal? Can you think of your biggest horror story?
Well, yeah, the biggest horror story was I did a deal one time that I was busy. I don't know. I think I had maybe 7 or 8 deals in escrow and LOIs out, and you know what that's like just to have one.
Confusing, yes.
Right. And so multiple phone calls from everybody that touches a deal. And what we had agreed upon was we had the LOI agreed upon, and we were going to gross up the price to factor in the brokerage commission.
Okay.
Seller agreed to that, no problem. And I didn't review the contract. So at the time of closing, at the day of closing, I sent over the commission disbursement to the title company, and they said, "What are you talking about? You're not part of this thing." So what do you mean I'm not part? Well, the price was grossed up, but there was no agreement, and it was $150,000 commission.
Did the seller honor it?
The seller the seller's attorney didn't want to honor it because we had nothing in writing. The buyer was reluctant to push the matter because they wanted to close the deal. Yeah, you're right. And so the only thing that saved us, or me, is that ultimately the seller agreed. I said, look, here's the LOI. It was for this amount. Here's the contract price, exactly $150,000 above it.
Yep.
Come on. And he agreed, and he paid it.
Good. Well, if that's your worst horror story, then you're doing great.
Well, you asked me quickly. But I can't think of, $150,000 loss in one day would have been.
Yeah, that
would
not have been a good day.
Yeah.
What about your best story? Your favorite story? There's a lot of great stories, but.
Well, okay, this is a story that has nothing to do with a deal. This is a story that has to do with a lady I met back in 2000, I want to say about 10. We were still in the throes of the Great Recession, and I was developing some more contacts for REOs. And she was working for someone who was deeply entrenched with some lenders and disposing of their assets. And she just struck me as a woman who was sharp. However, she wasn't being very successful because financially, because this individual, this broker, wasn't paying his people. Well, I drew her away from that brokerage. I asked her to come talk to me. I said, I think we can do better for you. Well, fast forward, she is now in a position where she manages a real estate concern that has a top line of probably $5 or $6 million a year.
Nice.
And I have a very nice letter from her how I changed her life, truly changed her life.
Wow.
Because I still know her and knew where she came from and the struggles that she went through. So it's not about a deal, but again, I'm very people-centric, and that's one of the stories that I feel very good about.
Good. It's always nice to get those because you never know whose life you impact and how.
Mm-hmm.
I've had people come back later and say certain things. I'm like, man, I barely remember meeting you. I must have said something that was impactful.
Right. Exactly.
That's always nice to get
Yep.
that feedback.
Yep.
That is great. Now, what do you think the next 24 months are going to look like?
Well, I'm not an economist, and even if I were, I don't think that all economists, just because by the virtue of the fact that they are, know what's going to go.
Well, they say themselves they are only half right.
Right.
So.
But if I were to start off with the American spirit, we're in difficult times, but we're at our best when we're in difficult times. And so I firmly believe that we will come out of this COVID, we will come out of this short-term recession, because I believe it's short-lived, and I think that what the benefit that will come out of it will be that particularly certain regions of the country are seeing a mass exodus because of a variety of things, COVID being one of them, in high-density urban areas, coming to Texas, and therefore the demand for rental property is just going to continue to grow.
Yes,
Companies are bringing their jobs here as well. The likes of Elon Musk and his brouhaha over on the West Coast, and now he's building in outside of Austin. So, long story short, I think it's just going to continue to do well. I remember you and I having this conversation many times back in 2013, 14, when the market had just started to take back off, and we've had this conversation. Why didn't we buy everything we could have gotten our hands on? But the question has been in the last 12 months is, are we in the 6th inning, or are we in the 7th, or are we at the bottom of the 9th? And every time that we would say, we're not sure, but we're sure of one thing, and that is everybody wants to come to Texas.
Yep.
And it's a real estate friendly, landlord friendly state. So I just think it's going to continue to grow. And for those of you who don't get on board with that thinking, you're going to miss out on some great opportunities.
Well, I saw an interesting thing. There's market cycles go up and down, but they trend up long term.
Mm-hmm.
And I went back and I did the same thing. Why did we buy everything we could get our hands on? The problem is because we look at it for cash flow.
Correct.
If we would have said, hey, we'll buy all these things at a 2 or 3% yield, we would have made home runs on absolutely everything.
Right.
Because anybody that bought anything from 2012 to 2015 absolutely killed it. And we were very conservative then. We stay conservative now.
We stay conservative, correct.
And so we're very selective on what we buy.
Mm-hmm.
And with your analysis and how deep you go and pulling from all the different sources and relationships and studying and everything you do, you add a huge amount of value to us for that. And not only that, you're also doing education for partners in this great room we have here. You can't really see it from your angles. Yeah. But continuing our education and doing additional talks with experts, I think you're going to add a whole lot of value, additional value above what you've already done, to all of our partners.
Well, I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, so I love having you on the team.
Thank you very much.
And is there any final parting words you want to add?
Well, I guess just to piggyback on my last couple of comments, and that is that for the last 3 or 4 months, we have been talking about the coming of the sell-off, and how we had not been seeing it due to the fact that rents were still being paid, vacancies weren't that high. But I think we're probably going to start to see it, and so now's the time to start putting all your ducks in a row, because the deals will come, and they're going to come. It won't be a floodgate, but they will come, and they're going to come to those who have an established relationship with those who, let's face it, if it's bad news, they're not going to want to publicize it. Nobody's going to want to, put it out on the front page, hey, I'm not doing well and I'm about to go under. So they would like to quietly exit from these properties, and they will quietly exit to people like DGRE.
All because we have relationships that you've been nurturing for the last 20
years.
Well,
it isn't just me. It's you, and it's our team. I mean, if you think about it, we've got easily over 100 years of experience between everybody at DGRE.
I think we've got the greatest organization out there, but I'm biased.
Yeah, me too. Hey, I'm still expect that check.
Yeah, I will cut it now.
All right.
But that's all we have time for right this minute. But thank you for joining us on Adventures in Real Estate. If you want to reach out to Julian, his email address is julian@dowrockrealty.com. worth.com, and you can reach out directly to him. He does third-party brokerage if you're interested in that. He looks at every single deal. So on the brokerage side, he does that as a third-party thing for us, but he also analyzes every deal that we look at buying. So feel free to reach out to him or anybody in our company. We also provide third-party management, brokerage, consulting, and even co-sponsorship opportunities for people. So if you have a question, reach out to us.
Reach out. Love to talk to you. And again, we're in the people business, so even if you just come by and see our offices, have a cup of coffee, you're more than welcome.
That is awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great day.
Thank you.